You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. Have you ever flipped through a Ducks Unlimited magazine and seen a picture of a duck that you really liked? Or maybe in Mississippi Outdoors magazine, a picture of a duck that really suited your eye? Well, it's possible. We're about to talk to the guy who took that photo. He is Edward Wall on today's show.
This episode of the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast is brought to you by the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks.
This is the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. And today we're talking with someone who is not as often in front of the lens. He's usually behind the lens. In fact, I bet you've seen his work somewhere, whether you knew it or not. He is wildlife photographer and videographer Edward Wall. Ed, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I tried to do the best job I could with the introduction, but that is true. Like most of the time, you're behind the lens as opposed to in front of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a lot of footage or pictures of me on the other side. I'm usually standing behind it. So
yeah, and I've been a fan of your work and kind of followed you on social media for a long time. But take me back to in your life. You're from here, kind of Brandon area, where you caught the wildlife photography bug. When did that start?
I guess it was about 11, 12 years ago. I actually just bought a camera. One of my buddies had made a coffee table book of just pictures of us while we were hunting and stuff. And I thought, man, that's really cool. I'd like to do that too. So I had no idea about cameras, anything. I've done some video self-video in deer hunts, turkey hunts in the past, but I wanted to make this coffee table book. So I bought a camera and started learning how to use it solely with the purpose of making that coffee table book. And I realized I really liked doing it and wanted to get better at it. So I started reading and watching videos and learning everything I could about it. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just transformed from there and turned into a career.
Yeah. And here you are, and, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of social media followers and posts later. Here we are 10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy.
And it's all inspired by seeing hunting photos in a coffee table book.
Yeah. That's how it all started. Literally, it was just going to make a coffee table book of me and my buddies hunting together and take some pictures of my dog, and kind of went from there.
And so I know this seems like jumping ahead, but now some of the places where your photography work has been published. Tell me about some of those. Like, it's pretty vast.
Yeah. I think I've got a little hunting room at my house, and I've got all the magazines I think I've been in. I think it's 100 and something. Pretty good mini magazine covers, Mossy Oak, Game Keepers, Mississippi Outdoors. And for the last few years, I've been taking pictures for DU magazine. Then obviously 2022 had a picture of mine. That was the Mississippi duck stamp, picture of a pintail. And then last year, the Mississippi Sportsman's license, which was a big deal to me. That was like one of my goals in photography was I wanted to get a picture of mine on the Mississippi Sportsman's license, and had it last year with a picture of my dog I took at a buddy of mine's place and up around Grenada.
Yeah. So you're trying to be humble, but hundreds of magazine covers, anywhere from Mississippi Outdoors to Ducks Unlimited, Duck Stamp, the Sportsman's License. I mean, and all of that inside really a good decade.
Yeah, pretty much.
Since the time you decided you wanted to do this.
Probably less than that, because the first 5 or 6 years, I took a whole lot of bad pictures. I'd get lucky every now and then, but for the most part, anybody who's ever picked up a camera knows there's definitely a learning curve when it comes to photography. And it's, there's not like just a how-to book. You kind of just got to get out there and learn. So for the first 5 years or so, like I said, at the time, I remember thinking, man, that's a great picture. And looking back now, I'm just like, man, that's wasn't nearly as good as I thought it was. But the first 5 or 6 years, took a lot of bad pictures, and every now and then I get lucky and take a good one. And so, but it was, like I said, even taking bad pictures, it was something I enjoyed and wanted to get better at. So,
I was going to ask you that. So obviously an avid hunter, that's kind of how this started with you. And so the comparison of you're hunting and your instrument is that gun versus you're kind of hunting for that photo and your instrument is that camera. For you as an avid hunter, how do those two things compare?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's they're definitely similar. Especially if we're like, if it's something we're filming, if we're filming a show or DUTV or any kind of hunting show or stuff. So you're basically, whereas a hunter's getting ready to take a shot, basically I'm trying to get in position to where I'm going to get the camera to get the main thing is just get the correct angle that I want for this shot where I've got, whether it's a duck coming in or a turkey or whatever it is.
So when you say angle, then obviously background and foreground is a big part of what you're looking at too, not just the subject.
Right. Yeah. But just, it's not, yeah, mainly the foreground as far as like if you've got a duck coming in, filming ducks can be really challenging, and it helps to be a duck hunter for sure. You can ask anybody that's ever tried to do it. But you got to kind of know what a duck's going to do. You got to kind of know what their next move is going to be and kind of be a step ahead of them, kind of like you would be if you're shooting a duck. So when you see a duck make that last swing and you know they're about to finish a certain way, you kind of get yourself in position where you've got the hunter, like if you're trying to get an over the shoulder shot, I know this duck's going to kind of land right here. So I want to get right about here where I can get it framed up where the duck's going to come in on the right side of the frame and I'm going to have a hunter on the left and kind of get the over the shoulder shot where you get the hunter and the duck in the same frame.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work out like that, but when it does, it's great. And so it's,
and I guess the difference being, with a camera, digital cameras, and therefore a memory card, you can pull that trigger and it snap at high frame rate. Whereas if you're the hunter in certain situations, you get one pull of the trigger and
that's right.
And that's it.
Yeah, for sure. Luckily we're not shooting on film anymore. So it's,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Take a bad one and just delete it and go to the next one.
Have you ever thought, Edward, about what guys who initially back in the day, the wildlife photography that was happening on actual film and the challenges those guys went through versus what it is now?
Yeah, it's crazy that I actually had this conversation with somebody not too long ago to think like if you're just now picking up a camera for the first time, you can kind of learn in real time.
Yeah.
When you take a picture, you can instantly look at it and say, okay, well, it's way overexposed, way underexposed. And then you can make changes in your settings based on looking at it in real time. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be trying to learn photography when you're shooting on film where you didn't have it right there at your disposal.
You had to go develop it.
You had to go develop it. And you don't remember exactly what your settings were and what this was and what this was and whether or not it was in, trying to get stuff in focus, and you don't know whether or not you got it in focus or not in real time. So, I'm sure that deterred a bunch of people from sticking with photography way back when. But
sure.
Nowadays, like I said, you can see it in real time, and it's obviously a lot easier to learn that way. And you probably helped a lot more people get into it.
Sure. Did you have someone who was sort of a mentor, someone you looked to?
Not really. I mean,
you're sort of self-taught.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, believe it or not, it's a bunch of YouTube stuff. And I mean, I had some guys that I hunted with and stuff, or that had been doing it for a while that helped me out here and there, but it was mainly just going out, taking my camera and going out there and taking pictures and figuring out as I went, watching a lot of YouTube videos. And no matter what you want to do on this earth, there's a YouTube video about how to do it. So people always ask me about that, photography questions, and I try to answer all of them that I can. But a lot of times I end up telling people, whatever questions you have, there's somebody more knowledgeable than me on YouTube that can answer, because there's just so much good information out there.
Yeah. And then you can kind of go through the trial and error yourself and try it out. I think back to that moment you said where there's something creative in your brain that was sparked by looking at this coffee table book that a friend had of photos. I would think that probably means you're either a right brain, creative person, artistic thinker, or you mostly are.
Yeah, actually, I'm left-handed, so
left-handed, right brain.
Yep.
And so I always hear that phrase, what success follows passion. And you sort of got a double dose, the passion that you have for hunting and then the passion that you immediately had for this wildlife photography. And I guess it sort of consumed you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Everybody has their hobbies. I'm a big golfer as well, but I sit for hours and hours and hours by myself in some marsh or some, rice field somewhere. And I could sit and take pictures of ducks all day and be content. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. And that's a lot of what it takes is just being out there. Having access to where a lot of ducks are is a big part of it. And then I guess putting in time to sit out there and being passionate about it, because you never know what that next picture is going to be. We were actually, quick story, we were hunting some public land this year in Northeast Arkansas, and we had hunted that morning. We're coming in, and we're staying at this friend of ours cabin, and right as we pulled to this three-way stop to make a left to go like another half mile to his cabin, I looked through and I could see some ducks in this property, a quarter mile out in front of me through this little opening. And I was like, man, there's a bunch of mallards out there. And I knew I had a bunch of stuff to do, but I said, we pulled in, I put my waders back on, and I grabbed my big lens, and I think I mapped it. It was like 700 yards. I had to wade through this cypress to get over there to them. But I did it, got over there and got set up. And the first picture I took was, because it was like beautiful sunshine, bluebird skies. First picture I took that day was a mallard locked up coming in, was banded. And I was like, well, that made it worth it to come out here,
Wow.
And so
700 yards wading through a swamp to get to a spot. How do you know where you want to go? I mean, it's just
basically, you just look at your map, your Onyx map, and all right, ducks are here. So basically, when I go set up to take pictures, I'm looking at where the ducks are, and then figuring out I want to get here based on the time of day it is.
Okay.
So in the evenings I want to be to the west side of them. So you always want to shoot with the sun at your back for any kind of wildlife.
So the light.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And so especially like a turkey picture or a duck picture. On cloudy days, it's those colors and those feathers just don't pop. You really need sunlight for shooting birds. Shooting anything else, I just soon never see the sun other than right at daylight and right at dark. But if you're shooting ducks or turkeys or birds, you really got to have sunlight. So basically, you're trying to figure out the ducks are here, the sun's going to do this, and I want to get right here so that for the most part, the sun's going to be right at my back going towards the ducks. So you get them perfectly front lit and don't have any shadows or anything.
That's awesome. Is that your favorite you've ever taken? Do you have a favorite duck photo you've ever taken?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I guess it was 2018. There was like a stretch where it got super cold, everything froze up, and we were in Northeast Arkansas hunting. Well, everything locked up. So we actually ended up hunting some dry fields in Northeast Arkansas, which is really rare in the Southeast to be hunting dry fields. That it's cold when you're hunting dry fields down here. But there's this on this refuge, there's this like 550 acre lake, and the entire lake was frozen except about maybe 5 or 10 acres right in the dead center of it. And the only reason it was open is because the ducks were keeping it open. There were so many ducks in this one area. They were standing up on the ice. They were just shoulder to shoulder. And even with my big lens, they were just a little too far.
We say big lens, 400, 600.
Yeah, back then I just it was a Tamron 150 to 600 that I took it with, but I've got a couple big 600 prime lenses now, but but even with that bigger lens, they were just a little too far. And so I decided, I was like, well, I asked one of the guys with us, I said, how deep's that lake? And he's like, man, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm about to walk out on it.
One way to find out.
Yeah. And he was like, I don't think that's a good idea. Well, the next day I couldn't stand it anymore. So I was like, I drove up there. I drove up to this lake and they were still there. And I was like, so I walked out. I was like, man, this ice is solid. And so I was like, well, I'll just kind of shuffle my feet and ease out there. So I eased out 200 or 300 yards. And still this day, looking back, it's probably the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm because I'm out there by myself. I have no idea how deep this lake is. And if I fall in, I'd probably certainly die. But I laid down on the ice and took some pictures, and all the ducks are kind of sitting there. Well, there was a whole, I think I counted 13 bald eagles around, swooping down, picking off ducks, because they're just kind of fishing a barrel at that point. But
whoa.
Yeah. But so one of the eagles swooped down and kind of bumped them. So a whole bunch of them get up at one time, and I snapped this picture. And I think it's been 5 or 6 years ago, but I think it was 9 different species of ducks in this one picture. And so it was a cool picture. And so every year Ducks Unlimited would have their national photo contest. And the previous year in 18, they have 3 categories and then an overall. And I'd won the retriever category with a picture I'd taken. And so in 2019, I submitted that one and actually won the overall deal. So it was the DU photo of the year for 2019. And in hindsight, it was worth it, but probably still a really dumb idea to be crawling out on ice that I have no idea how deep it is or anything. And I remember when I finally got up and was walking back, a sheriff's department guy drove down the road and honked at me. I kind of waved at him, and I walked back there, and they're kind of looking, and he was like, "Man, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm taking pictures." And he's like, "Yeah, you don't need to be out there."
How about that?
So it's like, yeah, I'm leaving.
And it paid off.
Yeah.
And if a young photographer comes to you and asks for advice, you're not going to advise that they do that.
I wouldn't tell them to do that,
But there's an element. I mean, I hear you talk. You describe these stories. I mean, you just said, I just shuffled out 200-300 yards. Listen, that's a long way to shuffle anywhere. The links that you and others like you in this profession, the links that you go to get the shot, I think you're being humble about it, because I think the links you go to get it is pretty incredible as opposed to most people who it's kind of a hobby.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, some of the best pictures I've ever taken of ducks have been out of the driver's seat of my truck.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. So ducks are, if you've got ducks that are close to a road, so they're used to that traffic, a lot of times, you know how a deer or turkey's in a field and you pull up and they'll run, as long as you're driving, it doesn't scare them. But when you pull up and stop, they'll run off. And ducks are kind of the same way, but if they're really used to that traffic, a lot of times they won't necessarily fly off. They'll just kind of move out a little bit. And with a big lens, you could still get some good pictures of them. But a bunch of them I've taken that's required a lot of walking and a lot of, there's I guess a cool picture I took last year was I found out that there was up in Tennessee at this it's actually public land. I heard this biologist, they had banded 9 turkeys there the year before. And I told one of my buddies, I said, I don't think I've ever seen a picture of a banded turkey still live. And so I went up there for 4 straight days for 8 hours a day. And it's a little over a mile walking in. I had this little blind walking through the woods, and I carried it in there 4 straight days. And the last day I got a picture of one. And so it kind of made it worth it. But I was
4 days.
4 days in a row.
Walk a mile in, a mile out, stay in that blind for 8 hours a day.
Not
close to it.
2 or 3 days it was. The last day we'd actually hunted that. It was opening day of Tennessee. So we'd actually hunted that day. That morning, drove into town, got something to eat, and I was like, I'm gonna go back. And my buddy said, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm gonna give it one more try." And so, and it paid off. But a lot of times it's carrying decoys after the season out into some place that but a lot of times it's just off side of the road or somewhere. If I'm driving down the road and see a bunch of ducks, it really doesn't matter. I'm gonna stop and at least try to, because you never know what you're gonna get.
You never know.
Yeah.
You got to hit that shutter to get something.
That's it.
All right. So I looked up, and for those listening, I follow you on social media, Wall Media there on Facebook, and then on Instagram. You got a ton of followers on Instagram, EdWall81. I was looking on the Facebook page, and here's a photo. I'm gonna send this to Chip. This particular photo of a mallard coming in. You remember that?
Yeah, I took that in Oklahoma this year.
In Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those where, again, you're talking about light. I was trying to judge where that sunlight's coming from, but it looks like it's kind of broadside, really.
Yeah.
Because there's a shadow on one foot from the other.
Yeah. and it was actually, so we were actually, I filmed with some guys out there, crash landing outdoors, and we were actually riding around around lunch one day, and everything was kind of locked up. I think everything was pretty locked up out there, but there was some spots that still had some open water, and Mac, the guy I was riding with, we see some ducks going down on a property that they don't have permission on. And so we pulled it up on X and looked, and Mac's like, oh, I know somebody knows that guy. And we parked on the side of the road and got the guy's number and called him. And he said, hey, I was like, hey, you mind if I go on your property and go take some pictures? It's a pretty good hike into that, where I got that spot too. It
was?
Yeah. And it was it was basically like a creek down there. There's not a ton of water out in Oklahoma, but I walked across this cornfield, went down this creek bank, and walked out to where, kind of sat there for a minute to see where ducks were going down, eased up there, and I ended up bumping them. There was a ton of ducks in there, and I ended up bumping them, but it was early enough in the afternoon that I just kind of sat up and they started pouring back in, and that was one of them.
That was one of them. It's an unbelievable shot.
Well, thank you.
And here's one I chose. I was looking through your Instagram, which, picking a good one on your Instagram page, I mean, it's like, a dime a dozen. They're all good. But this photo right here on Instagram at Edwall81 of that dog splashing through the water with a duck in his mouth. And your post there, it said, it's turkey season, but I still miss seeing dogs splashing through the timber. Tell me about that photo.
So I think I can't remember if that was last year or year before. So the great thing about like hunting in the timber, my favorite setting to take pictures in is timber hunting on cloudy days, which is not cloudy days for timber is not great because ducks don't like to come in the timber when it's cloudy, but it makes for some really good lighting for photography. So if you've got, like, this is a spot in Arkansas it's one of the best private places in Arkansas that I was up there filming for some guys. And even though it was kind of cloudy and overcast, the place is good enough that the ducks will still get in there. And so when you get cloudy days in the timber, it's my favorite because I know I'm going to get some good pictures. There's no shadows to contend with.
It's almost like you're under a giant softbox.
Correct. Exactly. So you get that soft, that moody lighting, and you don't have to worry about, like I said, when in timber, you've got shadows everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when it's cloudy or overcast, you don't have to fight those.
Yeah.
So it ends up being some good lighting for pictures.
So everything came together for that.
Yeah, perfect.
So you've mentioned filming too. So it's not just still photography, which I would guess that's kind of your first love, still photography?
Sure. I love shooting video, but I'm always going to be a photographer first.
Right.
That's my favorite thing.
That sort of led to opportunities to shoot video.
Correct.
For publications or Mossy Oak or people who want you to film their hunt, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a couple of buddies of mine bought an island in the Mississippi River, I guess 6 or 7 years ago. And Mossy Oak approached us about filming a show out there, about us kind of basically developing this island that was just nothing there. It was had like 300 acres of flooded timber on it. And so, lost break. So we've been filming it for 5 seasons now, but yeah, it's kind of led into that. And then I do some filming for DUTV every year, which is one of my favorite things. I get to go to some really cool places with DUTV, all over North America with them. So.
Something else. So whether it's, photo camera, video camera, that equipment, another part of it is there's an added challenge. It's a little different than hunting in that the conditions really can affect cameras. And I guess obviously they have to be water sealed, but I just think like people will know, like if they take their cell phone sometime or their own camera, have a hobby, and in Mississippi in the summer, you wake up and let's say it's 7 a.m. and you walk out on your back porch and you can't take any pictures because it's fogged up for the next 20 minutes.
For sure.
So lenses and those type of things, you're dealing with that and cold and water. There's a whole different set of challenges that you're dealing with than, say, a studio photographer.
Yeah, and you don't ever want to buy any equipment that I've used before. It's got mud and dirt and everything all over it. It looks like it's been dragged behind a side by side for half a mile. But yeah, I mean, you're dealing with all that kind of stuff. what's crazy is duck hunting. I haven't had any casualties duck hunting with gear. I've had 2 or 3, and they've all been turkey hunting. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah. So you've got, because I've always, one happened this year in South Florida. I just bought a brand new lens, had it on a tripod, and we were set up turkey hunting. And one of the guys we were with was behind us over my right shoulder and was sitting there calling. And and so I took the camera off the tripod, turned around and took a couple of pictures. And when I did, I set it back on there and I didn't lock it back down. So 20, 30 minutes goes by and we get up to move, pick up the tripod. And as soon as I went to throw it over my shoulder, I felt it slide off and I just held my breath and I heard it hit the ground. I turned around and it snapped the lens right in half.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
Was the day over or did you have a backup?
Yeah, I got to always carry a couple different lenses, like focal length lenses. But so for the rest of the day, I was down to one lens, but luckily
And to say those types of lenses, like you mentioned the 600, you know, a prime fast lens,
yep.
thousands of dollars worth of lens right there that hit the ground. Unfortunately,
this one was I mean this is about it's about a $3,000 or $4,000 lens that I broke that morning, but yeah, that big lens it's on up there.
It's on up there.
Yeah, it's but yeah, I've got it insured, but it would still hurt my heart if I dropped that big. It hurt my heart to drop that one. That big one would really hurt my heart.
Yeah.
And so,
a favorite turkey photo? We talked about ducks. See, and it's almost unfair because you have so many that are good and so many that have been published. I know it's unfair to say, do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, it's I guess I took some. It's not necessarily one that turkey one that I took. I guess there was a place over in Alabama I was doing some stuff for, and I was riding along. I was actually over there shooting some deer stuff, and I was riding along the side by side and across a pond dam, and some turkeys got up, and I just hopped out real quick. And usually I always try to keep my settings where I don't have to, if something happens spontaneously, I'm ready and I'm not fumbling with trying to change settings. So these turkeys went and flew across this little pond dam, and I'm shooting straight into the sun, which is ideally not what you want. But if it's the right time of day, it can be good. The sun's low enough, you're shooting into it, and you get them backlit. And so this turkey gets up and flies, and I shot, and there's like a wooden structure in the background. It just kind of ended up being a cool shot that was just spur of the moment luck. It's probably one of my favorite ones. And then my buddy Andy Forney, he's got a place up around Oxford, and I went up there. I've been up there the last 2 years, but not this past season, but in 23, he had a flock of turkey that was kind of using this open area and some pines every day and kind of roosting right there and pitching down. And it wasn't necessarily one photo I took up there, but I went up there for like 3 or 4 days in a row and got some really good, kind of the same thing with I was talking about the lighting in the timber, that little setting he had where it's a little bit open in those pines, and it was some really good lighting in there. And so those are probably my favorite group of pictures I've taken of turkeys was up at his place.
Yeah. 2 or 3 times you've mentioned, it was just luck. I was just lucky right there that it happened this way. And I guess it's like hunting in that there's always an element of some luck or chance that's built into it. But for someone like you, there's got to be more that goes into it, just luck. It's like being ready for that moment.
Yeah, I think there's definitely luck in some of the pictures I've taken for sure. I can think of a couple right offhand, but I think a lot of it is I'm just out there a lot. Like I would venture to say, not to sound whatever, but I probably spend as much time as almost anybody maybe in America taking pictures of ducks, as far as the amount of time I spend sitting and taking pictures of ducks. And it's every chance I get. And so, like I said, I love doing it. It's that aspect of it's definitely not a job for me. It's something I love doing. I spend a lot of hours doing it. And so part of it's just being there. Like you never know you can't, the old saying, you can't shoot them on the couch, or you can't kill them on the couch. You can't photograph them on the couch either.
That's right.
So Ed, we've talked to a lot of people on this podcast, and a couple of times we've had some law enforcement officers on here, and they'll talk about people that are poaching, and like they'll go out of their way to like shoot over the bag limit or something. And one thing I kept thinking about was, man, if only these guys were just into photography, they could just go out
That's right,
whenever they want and just go take a picture instead of having, break the law.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you feel like you've kind of like almost found a cheat code to hunting just because you enjoy photography so much? So you really, when you go out, like you still get satisfaction from your trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you killed something or not, because you still kind of captured the moment.
Sure. Absolutely. And one good thing about it is that I've been fortunate enough is that I get to go to some of the coolest places in the world, that it's solely because, not because everybody likes me or anything like that, just because, I've got a camera that people want me to come take pictures. So I get to go to places that most people don't. I'm very fortunate, that aspect. I get to see some really awesome places.
Yeah.
And I'm getting to, I might be filming a hunt at some big club in Arkansas or something, and everybody else is there with a gun. But for me, it's just as enjoyable to be there with a camera, and I'm getting paid to do it. And so that's, to me, it's one of the biggest benefits of it is getting to go to some of these really cool places, and obviously, that a lot of people don't ever get a chance to see.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So if we go back to, again, moment of inspiration, sort of the genesis is you're flipping through a buddy's coffee table book and you're like, wow, okay, I'm going to get a camera. I'm going to start learning this. And then over time you learn it. You said you took 4 years worth of bad pictures. I don't believe you, by the way. But anyway.
It's the truth.
And then at some point, somebody called you and said, hey, will you come do this for us? Who was that? When was that? And did they discover you from social media?
Yeah. So I can still remember the first. So I had like I said, it was just a hobby. And then I had some companies reach out about doing some, initially companies would send you some gear or something, and basically doing trade for, hey, we'll send you some gear, you send us some pictures, and did that for a while. And it was, it was great. And then it's actually BC Rogers that owns Ren and Ivy, that's here in the Jackson area. They make like high-end hunting gear, and he wanted to do a photo shoot. And it was actually out at the airport. He had got some models together, and he was doing, they were launching some new products and stuff. And he said, hey, I want to pay you to do this. And I was like, we can do it. He's like, no, I'm going to pay you. And so all of a sudden it was like, now I actually felt a little bit of pressure that first time, because like, if it's not any good now, if I'm doing it for free and it's not any good, well, you get what you pay for. But if you're actually paying me for this, then it's got to be good. And so it kind of started from there, and it was like that shoot ended up being really good. Once again, it was one of those days where it was foggy and overcast. It was perfect. And it kind of gave me, the courage, just like, all right, I think I can do this, full time. And it started being more and more people reaching out, and it just kind of went from there. But yeah, that was the first time anybody offered to pay me for something. It was still, at that time, it was just kind of, it's hard for me to grasp that somebody's going to pay me to come do this. Cause it was, like I said, it was still just such a hobby at that time.
Yeah.
So,
well, and we're deep into the interview now. So the people that are still listening and hanging on, there might be a few photography nerds like me still listening. So I got to ask, give me a glimpse at the kind of gear.
So I've got a couple different, so I shot a Canon 1DX Mark II for years. But when we were all still shooting DSLRs, which a bunch of people still are, and I've still got that camera, and I'll never get rid of it, just because it's just anybody that's ever clicked the shutter on one, it's something different. It's than any other camera you've ever shot. But nowadays I've got a couple different Canon R5s, and when I'm filming duck hunts or turkey hunts, I've usually got a Canon 28-70 2.0 on one body, and 70 to 200 on the other. But the taking duck pictures, turkey, if I'm shooting actual, just specifically wildlife photos, I've got a Canon 600 prime. I still got the DSLR one version that weighs like 13.7 pounds or something. It was so heavy you couldn't shoot it without at least a monopod. I could hand hold it for just a couple snapshots and then you'd have to set it down. But you always had to have a monopod. So when you could put it on a mirrorless camera, but you had to have an adapter, and big lenses or lenses in general aren't made to have an adapter.
Yeah.
And so the autofocus on it wasn't quite as fast. And when you're shooting birds in flight, that's a big deal. So I finally was like, man, I guess I'm gonna have to do this. And so I broke down and bought the mirrorless version. And when it came in, I took it out of the box. I reached down and grabbed it. I was like, oh my God, it weighs like less than 4 pounds. So it was like such night and day. I was like, oh my God, I can handle this. This is going to be awesome. So
a game changer.
Yeah,
from a weight
for
standpoint.
sure. Oh yeah. Especially like walking long distances.
Yeah.
Like you don't realize when you're toting, it's because it's just kind of awkward because your arm's like hanging down, or either you're holding it up over your shoulder. And if you're walking a mile or two in somewhere, especially through water and stuff, toting 3.5, 4 pounds versus 13 is a big difference.
I went on a fishing trip this past week where we caught a bunch of fish, and I made the statement. Everybody talks about tennis elbow. They talk about golf elbow, golfer's elbow. They don't talk enough about fisherman's elbow when you've set the hook all day long, but they also don't talk enough about photographer's elbow, especially for that one where you've got on the end of that big lens and hoisting it up. People who like shoot football games handheld. And
Yep. So
my hat's off to them.
That's crazy that you mentioned that. So this spring is like the first time the last couple of years I actually had to go see a specialist because the way you're holding it, your arms just kind of, so you're sitting here holding this, and your arm just kind of turned in a weird angle.
That's right. Yeah.
And about late January, it would start hurting me really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I could pick stuff up like this, but if I tried to pick something up like this, and actually had to go see a specialist about it, and finally got it fixed last year. And so I didn't really have any issues with it this year, but the last 2 years it had been bad. It's crazy. Man, can't believe my elbow that hurts this bad from taking pictures.
I guess the silver lining might be that on some duck hunts, it's cold enough that you just freeze up and you can't feel it hurt.
Right,
anyway.
exactly. Just get numb.
And just get numb from it. Well, that's really cool. All right, last thing for me. You mentioned that one time you had this goal. You wanted to be on the sportsman's license, wanted your picture there. You accomplished that. What's the next goal? What's out there?
Cover a DU. That's kind of, I think for the last, so DU is such a great organization. And like, obviously I do work for them, but it's not just lip service. I think a lot of folks at DU. So the photo contest they did when I first started, like that was my big goal, was I wanted to get a picture of mine in DU magazine. And they had this photo contest every year, and that was the only way to do it. And when I finally got in there and won the retriever category, I was just over the moon. And then the next year I won the overall. And then the following year I won the retriever category again. And the photo editor, John Hoffman, he had emailed me and was like, hey, congratulations. We'd rather you not enter anymore and we'll just submit pictures and we'll pay you for them. And I was like, well, that's even better. Like, I'm just trying to get in. You're going to pay me for them.
Hallelujah.
So for like the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I think I've had at least 1 or 2 pictures in every issue of DU, but I haven't got one on the cover yet of DU. And so that's kind of, I guess, on my bucket list of things I want to do career wise. That's up there. And there's a couple times when they send us they email us out the shot list they have of what images they're needing. I always scroll to the bottom and see what the cover shot is. And a lot of times they've already got one for it, so there's not a cover shot. But a few times I thought, man, it's like, actually twice I really, really thought, I was like, I've got the perfect picture. And neither one of them, they ended up picking somebody else, which the ones they picked were phenomenal, Yeah. And so, but yeah, that's I guess the main thing I've got left on my bucket list is the cover of DU magazine.
Well, and I would say, just going by kind of your career arc, checking off boxes, it's just a matter of time.
I hope you're right. We'll see. You never know. So, yeah. But I hope eventually at some point it'll happen.
Yeah. Edward, really do appreciate your time. It's great to meet you.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, well, a lot of fun for me. I've been a fan for a long time.
I appreciate it. I appreciate
I
it.
really do appreciate you giving us some time.
Absolutely.
He's Edward Wall. Y'all can follow his work, his photography, and other works on social media at edwall81 on Instagram, and look up Wall Media over there on Facebook as well. Thanks for listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. We'll see you outdoors.